Hi everyone! So today we're going to be going over my first book review. Yay! The first one that I have here, I'm actually going to be reviewing two books, which you could probably tell by the title of this video. The two books are Divergent and Insurgent by Veronica Roth. Obviously I decided to review them together because I read them basically back to back and they go together in case you couldn't tell. So a fun story about these books, I actually heard about them a little bit just from other people reading them and talking about how good they were, and I didn't really want to read them just because I wasn't interested in another young adult dystopian novel. There are so many out there and I kind of felt like I had my fill of them. I wanted to read other things. But then everyone started talking about these books again because Insurgent was coming out and people were either reading Divergent for the first time or rereading it before Insurgent came out. So I decided to just look into it and see a little bit more about these books and Veronica Roth, and I somehow got hooked onto it through the internet, which is weird. So I decided that I would read Divergent, and if I liked it then I would pre-order Insurgent and go and meet Veronica Roth and get my book autographed. So I picked up Divergent from Barnes & Noble on, I think it was either a Sunday or Monday night, and then I ended up reading it in basically a day. So then obviously I ordered my ticket and pre-ordered my book for Insurgent, and so I could meet Veronica Roth and go to the signing. Now this wasn't my first time going to an author signing, but it definitely was my first time going to an author signing for a young adult novel, which is very different because I was basically the oldest person there outside of some parents, and it was kind of crazy. They said they had over 300 pre-orders in that store alone, and then there were probably about 500 people there total. Which was insane because we're just inside of a bookstore and it's not very big. Like, there weren't multiple levels, it was one level. It was Anderson's bookstore in Naperville, if any of you guys have been there before. It was kind of crazy just to see all of those people there and be really excited about a book, which I kind of loved, that there were kids excited about books. So I couldn't really blame them for that. But it was a lot of fun. She did a reading from chapter 8 of the novel, and then she answered questions from the fans in the audience, which was really nice. After that, she had to sign about 300 books. I was number 196 in the list, and so they basically told us if you're under 100, you could stay in the bookstore. If you were over 100, you should basically just leave and come back in an hour, and then maybe they would be close to it, your number, and then they said like if you were 200 and over, come back in like an hour and a half, and so on and so forth. Luckily this took place in downtown Naperville and they have a nice boardwalk type thing where it's just a bunch of little shops. I went and got gelato and read the first couple chapters of the book while I was waiting. Then I came back in about an hour and they were just hitting number 100, so I decided to just sit in the bookstore and read for the rest of the time until they got closer to my number. It was kind of weird because everyone in front of me in line had all these questions for her and were asking her different things about the book, and I kind of wanted to be like, hi, I just read your book like 3 days ago. But I didn't. I actually just only said hi to her. It felt a little weird to be fangirling over someone who is technically younger than you, but she was really nice. She was very sweet, and she even brought her dog, which was fun. That's my little story before I go into the book review. So for those of you that don't know, this takes place in a dystopian Chicago where society has decided to break itself off into 5 separate groups, and these groups are based on very specific personality traits. So the 5 groups are candor, honest, abnegation, selfless, dauntless or brave, amity are peaceful, and erudite are intelligent. So basically what happens is you are born into a very specific group, and then you grow up, and then when you're 16 you take a test, and then the test tells you what group or what personality you have. So you can either choose to stay with the group you were born into, or you can leave the group and go into another, but it's often seen as like this huge betrayal to your family and to the people who have basically raised you for your life thus far, to go into to leave to another group, and it's kind of a slap in the face basically. So what happens is the main character Beatrice, or Triss as she is later known to be, takes the test, and she doesn't just test into one other groups. She tests into 3, so she's known as the Divergent. The Divergent are seen as being very rare. She's told like not to talk about it, don't tell anyone what your results were because it's dangerous. You're not really sure why, although they talk about it more and more later in the book. She basically has a choice of what to do and where to go. This book is really, really good. Obviously, I said I read it in like a day, partially because it's a young adult novel, but partially because it just is that good. It's really interesting to see the choices that she makes. She also has a twin brother, so he takes the test at the exact same time, and to see the choices that they've made and basically the consequences for their choices. You see in the beginning of the novel, Tris kind of looking out onto the groups and seeing like which one would she go into if she tested, or which one does she want to go into, and she's already questioning that at an early stage. Like, does she want to stay with her family or does she want to leave to another group? And so the book goes on, and you see like they don't just leave to go into their group. After they choose whether they want to stay or leave, everyone has to go through an initiation process, and the initiation process is different for every faction, because depending on what the character trait is, they need to you need to prove that you actually have that character trait in order to stay in that group. And if you fail, or if they decide that you aren't worth it, you leave, and you're basically factionless, which is basically being like homeless, because you don't have a group of people to support you, or a group of people to help you along in society, things like that. So it's basically seen as being like homeless. There are so many reasons why I love this book. The characters are really compelling. I really love Tris. It's interesting to just see how she views the world, and then see how everyone else views the world. Because she's divergent, she has more than one personality trait, you could say, that drives her, as opposed to everyone else who seems to have only one character trait that drives them. Not that they're one-dimensional, but that's like the main characteristic that you see in them, and it's very strong in them. It's really interesting to see how her character is just different, because it seems to be more multifaceted almost, because she's divergent. And then also just seeing how she interacts with the other people who are the initiates in her group. And there is of course a love interest in here. His name is Four, and he's pretty great. I loved him so much. And I really love the fact that Veronica Roth chose not to do a love triangle, which seems to be the new cliche thing to do. Obviously love triangles are great in books because it creates a tension, but she tries to create different types of tension within the book and the relationship. Obviously on a very superficial level, you can compare these to other popular books like The Hunger Games, because it's dystopian, or even I saw like bits of Harry Potter, just because of the way they sort people, so to speak. But I think again that's a very superficial analysis of these books if you just leave it as that, like a new Hunger Games or a new Harry Potter. But then again, people were also saying the Hunger Games were the new Twilight, which makes no sense because they are nothing alike at all. So people will always make those comparisons, but I wouldn't say that. I highly recommend this. I mean, I would say get both of these. Insurgent basically takes place immediately after, or at the end of this book. They basically go back to back. I was very lucky to be able to read both of these at once. But Insurgent is very different, because basically what happens is a war breaks out at the end of Divergent, and then this is all about Trish and the initiation into her faction, and the people that she meets, and the people that she either grows to love or grows to hate based on what happens in the book. And then Insurgent is all about the war. You see factions growing closer, you see factions breaking apart, you see factions making alliances with each other, and it's very interesting to see how all the character traits of these different factions are positives, but at the same time, if that's the only thing about them, they're also negatives. One of the great things about books like this is it really makes you think a lot about what you would do if you were in this situation. I definitely spent a lot of time thinking about what faction I think I would be in, and what faction maybe I would choose to be in if I wasn't born into that one, and it was actually really hard for me to decide. Initially I thought I would be abnegation, but then I also feel like I would be an erudite, because not that I'm smart, but I like learning, so I feel like that would also appeal to me a lot. But then at the same time I was like, maybe I want to be amity because they're peaceful. I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess that's why they give them tests instead of just letting them choose. So basically, yeah, I really like these books a lot, and I can't wait for the third one to come out. I think they said it's supposed to come out next year, 2013. So I have a little bit to wait for that, unfortunately. But apparently Veronica Roth is still writing it. At least that's what she said at the Q&A session. So hopefully it will be out soon, and then we can read it and see how it ends. I'm really interested to see how this all concludes, and I'm kind of hoping a couple of questions that I have are answered. For example, they basically only talk about Chicago, and basically they say everyone lives within the Chicagoland area, and I'm assuming that includes suburbs and things like that. But then I'm wondering like what the rest of the nation and the world is like. Is it only Chicago that's broken up into these factions, or is Chicago the only place that has people surviving? Because in the Hunger Games, they talk about how it basically is across the entire United States, and she explains like the different parts, like the Appalachians, and you know, the capital is in Denver basically, and things like that, and you see the different groups of people, but they're spread out across the country. And so I wonder if this is the only place that has people living, or if there are other people out there and they are just separated somehow or for some reason. Things like that are basically my questions. I know there's still a third novel. Like the second book does a really good job of answering a lot of the questions that the first book brings up but doesn't necessarily answer, which is good. But then I feel like I still have a lot more questions, and then I don't know what I would do if those aren't answered. Maybe those are things that are supposed to be insignificant to the novel. I mean, obviously the rest of the world doesn't always have a bearing on my life, so it won't always have a bearing on these characters' lives, but at the same time, if there's a war breaking out in this area, you would think that if there are other people around, they would recruit those people or work with those people, or those people would have a say in what's happening, things like that. Those are my thoughts. If you read these books, let me know what you think. If you liked them, didn't like them, who your favorite characters are, anything like that. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. I'll hopefully have some more videos up for you guys real soon. So thanks for watching. So today we're actually, let's do it again. So for those of you who don't know the story, basically this takes place in a dystopian. Groups are based on different personality traits. So one of them is abnegation, which everyone there is really selfless, and the other one is amnesty, which is all about peace, or there is, I can't remember the other one's, crap. Knew I should have written it down. A specific group, and then when you turn 16 you take this test, and then the test tells you what your personality is and therefore what group you can go into. Dang it! Let me turn this off. Alright, that's on silent.